The night sky above the border system was quiet, just like every other night before it. Alien patrol fleets floated lazily around the edge of their territory, their commanders relaxed, their systems half asleep. They had no reason to worry. Humanity had never attacked first in its history. Humans were the ones who always held back, who sent messages, who waited for the Council to decide. But deep in the darkness beyond their scanners, something moved. Huge shadows, silent and cold, drifted closer. One by one, Terran warships came online, their black hulls blending perfectly with the void. No lights, no warnings, no signals, just silence. On the Terran flagship, the crew stood ready. The commander stared at the tactical map with calm eyes, his hands behind his back. Every officer in the room felt the pressure in the air. This wasn't a test. This wasn't a drill. This was the first strike. Humanity was about to make the galaxy remember their name. For years, the galaxy had mocked humans. They called them weak diplomats, slow thinkers, peaceful talkers. They believed humans could be pushed around, forced into corners, and silenced with rules. The Council had stripped their colonies of resources, blocked their trade routes, and humiliated their ambassadors. But while the galaxy celebrated its power, humans were building in the dark. New fleets, new weapons, new strategies. They kept quiet. They waited. And tonight, they would strike before anyone even knew what was happening. The countdown on the flagship began. 10 seconds. The bridge was silent. Only the low hum of the engines vibrated through the ship. 9. Tactical officers fixed their eyes on the screens, tracking alien patrols that didn't even realize death was approaching. 8. Pilots locked their weapons, every barrel already pointed at a target. 7. The alien border fleet was still calm, drifting like sheep under the eyes of wolves. 6. The commander raised his hand. Slowly. 5. A thin smile formed on his face. 4. The crew tensed. 3. The engines roared. Quietly. 2. Energy surged through the ship. 1. His end came down. The black sky lit up with blue light. Hundreds of Terran railguns fired at once, their projectiles slicing through the void at terrifying speed. The first alien cruiser exploded before it could even raise its shields. 2 more followed seconds later, their decks torn apart like paper. Alarms screamed across the border fleet, but it was too late. The Terran strike was too fast, too precise. Energy lances followed the railgun rounds, piercing enemy defenses like they were nothing. A rain of fire fell across the border system, but it wasn't from the aliens. It was humanity's storm. Alien ships tried to turn, but the Terran fleet was already among them. Their movements were sharp and coordinated, like a single living creature. Years of silent planning now unfolded, like a blade being drawn from its sheath. Alien captains shouted orders in panic, but their systems were too slow to keep up. Their scanners had barely detected the humans before the battle was already lost. One by one, their ships were torn apart by precise, merciless strikes. Explosions spread like bright flowers across the void, beautiful and deadly. On the flagship bridge, the crew didn't cheer. There was no celebration, only focus. They knew what they were doing was bigger than one battle. This was the first punch in a war that would shake the entire galaxy. The commander walked slowly to the front of the bridge, his boots echoing softly against the metal floor. Through the reinforced glass, he watched the alien fleet collapse like falling dominoes. His voice was calm when he finally spoke. They thought we would never strike first. Let them remember this night. Across the galaxy, on countless worlds, alien citizens stared at their broadcast screens in disbelief. The images spread fast. Terran warships surrounding the border fleet like predators, fire cutting across the darkness, alien ships burning in silence. For decades, the Council had told them humanity was harmless, a talker, not a fighter. But the truth was now glowing across the sky, undeniable and brutal. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, alarms rang as urgent reports poured in. Ambassadors and leaders gathered around the center holotable, their faces pale. No one spoke at first. They couldn't. For years they had treated humans like a lesser power, something they could control. But now they watched as entire defense lines fell in minutes. One alien leader slammed his hand on the table, shouting for immediate action. Another whispered that it couldn't be real, but it was. Humanity had attacked first, and they weren't stopping. Back at the border, the last alien cruiser exploded, sending a shockwave across the system. Terran ships slid past the burning wreckage like hunters moving through ash. They did not slow down. They did not retreat. This was only the beginning. As the smoke of destroyed fleets drifted silently through the stars, humanity's message was clear without a single word spoken. We will no longer wait. The commander gave new orders. The fleet accelerated deeper into alien space. Communication lines were cut. Defense grids were already failing. The galaxy had always believed that humanity would be too afraid to make the first move. But tonight, that belief burned away with the ships that once guarded the border. This wasn't just a battle. It was a warning. Humanity had entered the war, not as the victim, but as the predator. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The Galactic Council chamber was no longer calm. The golden walls that once echoed with empty speeches now shook with fear. Ambassadors shouted over one another, their faces pale as endless streams of red alerts filled the center holotable. Every system near the border was burning. Patrol fleets gone. Defense stations destroyed. Communication hubs silent. For years, they had told themselves humanity would never dare to strike first. But the impossible had happened. And worse, it had happened fast, too fast. Their entire security line was being ripped apart before their fleets could even react. On the Terran flagship, everything was the opposite. Calm, cold, sharp. The crew moved like clockwork, their hands flying across controls without a single wasted second. Orders didn't need to be shouted. They flowed like a single heartbeat. Their commander stood at the front of the bridge, his eyes fixed on the tactical screen, where alien ships burned like dying stars. He wasn't surprised by how easily the first line fell. They had studied these defenses for years. They knew exactly where to strike, how to make the alien systems blind, and how to silence their communications in seconds. Every move tonight had been written long before the first shot was fired. Far away, on an alien homeworld, defense ministers were being dragged from their beds as emergency sirens echoed through cities. People poured into the streets, staring at giant public screens as images of Terran ships flooded the airwaves. No one could understand what they were seeing. The humans weren't supposed to have fleets this large. They weren't supposed to have weapons this advanced. For years, the galaxy had believed humans were just a minor power hiding behind diplomacy. But the sight of black warships moving through fire like shadows shattered that belief in minutes. Alien admirals rushed to assemble counterfleets, but everything was chaos. Their defense network had been built on the idea that humanity would react, not attack. Their fleets were stationed far behind, their best ships unprepared, their leaders arguing instead of acting. By the time they launched emergency orders, humanity was already deep in their territory. The alien high command shouted conflicting commands. Some wanted to retaliate, others screamed to contact the Council for peace talks. But every moment they wasted was a moment humanity used to push forward. Inside the council chamber, panic turned into desperation. A group of senior ambassadors tried to stabilize the room, but no one listened. One alien slammed his hand on the table, yelling that this was an act of war. Another shouted that they should have crushed humanity long ago when it was weak. But in the corner of the chamber, an old ambassador remained silent, his eyes fixed on the burning systems flashing on the hologram. He whispered softly, "We thought they were weak, but they were watching us all this time." Back at the front line, Terran ships moved with terrifying precision. They didn't pause to loot or boast. They advanced. They hit one station, disabled another, then moved on before the enemy could react. Their fleets were like blades cutting through silk. The alien captains who survived the first strikes tried to regroup, but their communication lines were already jammed. Their targeting systems were confused, and their morale shattered. No one had ever seen humans like this, not begging for peace, not defending their home, attacking, leading, winning. The first wave of Terran warships turned toward the next sector. Behind them, the alien border burned in silence. Ahead of them, the second line of defense waited unknowingly. The commander lowered his hand slowly, giving the next order. "Push through," he said in a steady voice. No turning back. Across the galaxy, alien leaders were finally realizing something that chilled their blood. They were not facing the same humanity they had controlled for so long. They were facing something new, something forged in silence, something that no longer cared about playing by the Council's rules. The Council floor fell silent for the first time in years as the final report came in. Entire fleets gone in less than an hour. Not a single human ship destroyed. No negotiations. No warnings, just war. The night the humans struck first would be remembered not for the noise of their guns, but for the silence of the galaxy that followed. It was the silence of power shifting, of fear growing, and of an empire being born in fire. Humanity had taken the first step, and nothing would ever be the same again. The alien fleets finally came alive, but it was already too late. The first wave of Terran warships had carved a path so deep into their territory that panic spread faster than any defense signal. Commanders screamed through broken comms, trying to gather scattered squadrons, but their orders only reached silence. Terran jammers had wrapped the entire sector in a black fog. No signals in, no signals out. The aliens were fighting blind, and they didn't even know where the next attack would land. Above one burning station, a single Terran Dreadnought drifted like a predator in dark water, its weapons glowing faint blue. It wasn't in a hurry. It didn't have to be. On the Terran flagship, the bridge was steady, silent, focused. The commander stood tall as officers fed him updates. Enemy positions collapsing, second line detected, reinforcements moving too slow to matter. He looked at the map, like a hunter watching prey fall into a trap it never saw coming. For years, humanity had been underestimated. The aliens laughed at their ships, mocked their limited fleets, and ignored the secret weapons they were building in the shadows. What the galaxy didn't know was that Terran intelligence had mapped every alien fleet movement, every weak spot, every slow response time. Tonight was not a gamble. It was the execution of a plan written long ago. In the alien command center on a nearby world, chaos ruled. High-ranking officers argued like frightened children. Some demanded to retreat and protect the capital systems. Others screamed to counterattack. But their fleets weren't ready for war. They were spread thin, positioned for control, not defense. A young alien officer shouted that the humans had bypassed their main defense grid entirely. It wasn't possible, but the map didn't lie. Terran ships were now moving toward key supply lines. If they cut those, entire sectors would starve before any fleet could form a response. Meanwhile, in space, a second Terran formation emerged from behind a dead moon. These ships were different, sleek, angular, built for speed and precision strikes. They carried weapons the galaxy had never seen before. Alien scanners tried to lock on, but failed. Terran cloaking and signal scrambling made them ghosts in the night. One by one, alien listening posts vanished in silent flashes of blue. Entire defense nets went dark without firing a single shot. Alien admirals tried to rally what was left. A massive fleet formed around the core of the sector, more than 1,000 ships. Their plan was to surround the humans, overwhelm them with numbers, and crush their offensive before it reached the heart of their territory. But the humans already knew. They had intercepted everything before the admirals even finished their orders. On the Terran flagship, the commander's lips curled into a cold, thin smile. This was exactly what they wanted. The Terran fleet split like a blade. One half turned away, pretending to retreat. The aliens took the bait, pushing forward in one large formation, thinking they had forced the humans to run. That was their mistake. In the shadows behind them, a hidden Terran strike group waited. These ships had been silent since the war began, holding position like predators under the surface. The moment the alien fleet passed, the hidden ships lit up. Hundreds of missiles streaked forward, cutting through the void like shooting stars. The alien rear exploded in seconds. Their formation broke. Confusion spread like wildfire. The alien admirals screamed for the fleet to turn, but their maneuvering systems were too slow. By the time they realized the humans hadn't retreated at all, the main Terran force had reappeared right in front of them. They were surrounded, the sky filled with light as the battle erupted. Terran railguns, lances, and missile swarms crashed into alien formations with surgical precision. The aliens fired back, but their attacks scattered, uncoordinated, desperate. Terran ships moved like shadows, avoiding heavy fire, striking where the enemy was weakest. Inside the council chamber, the tension turned into a thick, choking silence. Every display in the room showed the same thing, an entire alien fleet falling apart against a human force half its size. One council leader whispered, "This isn't a war. This is a hunt." No one answered. They all knew it was true. On the battlefield, the alien flagship tried to flee, but it didn't make it far. A Terran destroyer intercepted it, disabling its engines with a clean shot. Moments later, the flagship was torn apart in a blinding flash. The remaining alien ships panicked, breaking formation. The battle that was supposed to crush the humans turned into a massacre. The commander watched the burning wreckage float into the darkness. He didn't smile this time. He just lowered his hand, and the fleet moved forward again without hesitation. This was not the end. This was only wave 2. Every alien who survived this battle would spread the same message across the stars. The humans struck first, and they were unstoppable. The galaxy had spent years laughing at humanity. Tonight the laughter died, and the fear began. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, the golden ceiling that once symbolized power now reflected the red glow of emergency signals. Leaders who once sat proud now looked like shadows of their former selves, frozen as if the floor had dropped from under their feet. The Council's massive holotable showed one horrifying truth. 3 border systems were gone. Their fleets didn't retreat. They didn't even get the chance. Terran ships moved through their defenses like water through broken stone. Entire star bases that once took decades to build were turned into silent ruins in minutes. The Council had planned for a slow, careful war, but humanity had given them something else, a storm. Ambassadors shouted over one another, their voices sharp with fear. Some demanded to launch every reserve fleet. Others screamed for peace talks before the humans reached their core systems. The council chair tried to calm them, but his voice was drowned in chaos. No one was united anymore. The power they once held over humanity was slipping through their fingers like sand. For decades, they believed they could control Earth through trade restrictions, political pressure, and military threats. But none of that mattered anymore. Humans weren't negotiating. They weren't asking for permission. They were advancing, and nothing seemed able to stop them. Far away from the noise of the council, deep in the alien core sectors, panic spread like fire through the population. Civilian transports clogged the spaceways as citizens tried to flee closer to the inner worlds. News broadcasts showed endless loops of Terran warships tearing through their fleets. Alien leaders had always told their people that humanity was weak, a minor race clinging to old ideals. But the images now were clear, black angular ships cutting through entire formations like they were nothing. People began to realize the truth. They had believed a lie for too long. On the Terran flagship, everything remained steady. No panic, no cheering, only movement. The commander stood silent as his officers reported the next set of targets. Their advance wasn't wild or chaotic. It was planned, measured, and ruthless. A fleet this precise was not built overnight. Humanity had been preparing for this for years, maybe decades in secret, while the galaxy turned its back. This was not just a war. This was a statement. The commander's eyes stayed on the map as another enemy system was marked in red. "Move to Phase 3, he said calmly. No emotion, no hesitation. In alien command centers, panic turned into arguments. Generals blamed admirals. Admirals blamed politicians. Politicians blamed the council. But blaming didn't stop the incoming fleets. Every hour, another line of defense was erased. One alien admiral pounded his fists against the table, yelling that their fleets were stronger in numbers. But the numbers no longer mattered. Terran strikes didn't hit head-on. They struck like knives in the dark, cutting supply chains, destroying communication relays, and isolating every unit before wiping it out. No matter how many ships the aliens had, they were fighting shadows. Council intelligence officers played the intercepted Terran broadcast again and again. It wasn't even a threat, just a short message that echoed across every frequency they tried to block. "You taught us to be quiet. Now we will make the galaxy listen," those words repeated like a heartbeat, cold and sharp. The council members felt it like a knife pressing against their throats. Humanity wasn't just attacking, they were making sure everyone was watching. The alien high command gathered a last line of defense near their inner sectors. The largest fleet they had ever assembled floated like a wall of steel in the dark. Every race sent their strongest ships. Thousands of vessels pointed their cannons toward the stars, waiting for the Terran fleet. It was supposed to be their great stand, the moment they'd push humanity back. But deep down, the admirals already knew what the outcome would be. Humanity had not lost a single major ship so far. Their fleets moved like they were 10 steps ahead of every defense plan. The council chair finally stood, his hands trembling, his voice unsteady as he addressed the chamber. "We cannot stop them," he whispered. No one answered. It wasn't weakness. It was truth. Every race in that room realized they had built their entire empire on the illusion of control. That illusion was breaking apart. One ambassador shouted that they should surrender. Another called for the use of banned weapons. A third whispered that it didn't matter what they did anymore. Back on the front, the stars around the alien defense fleet flickered as Terran warships dropped out of FTL. Dozens, then hundreds. Their black hulls reflected no light. Their engines burned cold and blue. Every alien captain who saw them felt the same thing at once. A deep, cold fear that no training could erase. This was no longer just war. This was history being rewritten in fire. On the Terran flagship, the commander watched as the enemy fleet formed its line. He didn't need speeches. He didn't need rage. His calm voice echoed through every Terran ship in the formation. Advance, engines ignited like a silent wave. Across the galaxy, billions of eyes watched through shaky broadcasts as humanity faced the greatest alien fleet ever assembled without a trace of hesitation. This was the moment the galaxy understood. Humanity wasn't playing by their rules anymore. They were writing new ones. The stars above the defense line flickered as the two greatest fleets in galactic history stared at each other across the cold void. On one side, the combined might of the alien council, thousands of warships from every major race, forged through centuries of power and control. On the other, the Terran fleet, dark, silent, perfectly aligned, like a blade waiting to strike. For a brief moment there was no sound, no movement, just tension stretching through the darkness like a wire ready to snap. Every alien admiral believed they were about to crush the humans with sheer numbers, but deep inside, none of them felt certain. Humanity had already destroyed everything that stood before this point without losing momentum. They were moving with purpose, as if they knew something the galaxy didn't. On the Terran flagship, the commander's eyes were locked on the massive formation ahead. His officers reported energy signatures, shield levels, firing arcs. The alien fleet was strong, but it was also predictable. Humanity had studied their tactics for decades. Every maneuver, every response pattern was already mapped. The commander didn't see a wall in front of him. He saw weak points hiding inside that wall, waiting to be broken. "They're ready," his tactical officer said quietly. The commander didn't hesitate. "Good," he replied. "Then let's begin." The first Terran wave moved like shadows cutting through light. Dozens of frigates and destroyers shot forward in perfect formation, engines glowing cold blue. Alien sensors picked them up instantly. Admirals shouted to their crews to open fire. Thousands of cannons and beam weapons lit up the black sky, turning the void into a storm of light. But Terran ships didn't slow down. They weaved through the storm with machine-like precision, every maneuver calculated, every dodge pre-planned. The alien barrage looked powerful, but it hit only empty space. Then the Terran counterstrike came. Railguns fired in a single unified pulse. The sound didn't carry in space, but the impact did. The alien front line shattered. Entire cruisers disappeared in blue light. A wall that was supposed to last hours broke in seconds. Alien admirals tried to rally their fleets, but the humans weren't attacking in a straight line. They were cutting through weak points like surgeons, splitting the alien wall into fragments. Panic began to spread through the ranks. And then it happened. The sky split open. A massive distortion rippled behind the Terran fleet as a ship unlike any other emerged. It was bigger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Leviathan-class Dreadnought, a ship humanity had built in secret, hidden beneath their homeworld's ice rings, away from alien eyes. Its hull was black and smooth, absorbing every trace of light. Its weapon cores glowed with a calm blue fire that promised only destruction. Every alien admiral who saw it fell silent. They had heard whispers about such a ship, but no one believed it was real. Now it hovered before them like a dark god. "Leviathan online," the Terran weapons officer said softly. The commander gave no speech. No warning, just one word: fire. The Dreadnought's main cannon ignited, bending the stars around it as it released a single, focused beam. The alien center line didn't even have time to raise full shields before the beam tore through them like paper. Capital ships, some of which had stood for centuries, melted away in seconds. One blast opened a hole wide enough for the entire Terran second wave to pour through. The alien fleet tried to close formation, but the humans were already inside, surrounding their core like wolves among panicked prey. Inside alien ships, alarms screamed. Crews shouted. Fleet commanders issued desperate, conflicting orders. Some wanted to retreat. Some wanted to fight. Some froze completely. The Council fleet was massive, but without unity it was collapsing. Terran fighters swarmed through the broken lines, disabling engines and cutting comms. Alien warships fired blindly, hitting their own ships as chaos consumed their ranks. The cold, disciplined human fleet continued its advance with frightening calm. From the Council chamber, the leaders watched the battle unfold on giant holographic screens. It was supposed to be their strongest defense, their last line. Instead, they were watching it burn. One leader buried his head in his hands. Another screamed at the generals through the comms, but the only response he got was static. The chair of the council whispered the words everyone was afraid to say, "They're unstoppable." Back in the heart of the battle, the Leviathan Dreadnought rotated slowly, its massive rail arrays charging again. The alien flagship, the symbol of council power, hovered in the distance. It was surrounded by its last loyal defenders, but they were nothing compared to what was coming. Terran ships moved around it like a storm, tightening its grip. The commander's voice remained steady, almost cold. "End the line," he said. A final volley erupted from the Terran fleet. The alien flagship's shields cracked like glass, its hull tearing open as the Leviathan's second blast ripped through it. A shockwave swept across the battlefield, silencing every alien transmission. Their great fleet, their final wall of defense, was broken. Wreckage floated through space, glowing red against the cold stars. The Terran fleet didn't celebrate. There was no joy in their advance, only purpose. The path to the core worlds was now wide open. The galaxy's greatest fleet was gone, and for the first time in centuries, the Council understood what fear truly felt like. Humanity had struck first. Humanity had broken the unbreakable, and the war was far from over. It was only just beginning. The galaxy had fallen silent. Not the silence of peace, but the silence that follows when something unstoppable tears through everything in its path. The Alien Council's Grand Defense Fleet, once called the Shield of the Stars, was nothing more than glowing debris drifting through the black. Ships that had stood for centuries were now broken skeletons. Stations were cold and dark. The proud banners of 100 alien races now floated burned and torn among shattered hulls. What had been their greatest military force had lasted less than a single night. Inside the council chamber, no one shouted anymore. No one moved. The same room that once overflowed with arrogance and laughter now smelled of fear. The council chair, who once spoke down to Terran ambassadors as if they were beneath him, sat frozen with wide eyes. Hollow feeds from the battlefield played on every wall. The Leviathan-class Dreadnought hovered in the center of the destruction, its engines calm, its weapons cooling like the breath of a monster after a kill. One alien ambassador whispered they didn't even use their full strength. But no one dared answer. They all knew he was right. Across alien homeworlds, panic devoured order. Crowds filled the streets. People screamed at their governments, demanding protection. But there was none left to give. Their great fleets were gone, their defenses in ashes. News channels broadcast endless footage of Terran warships moving forward without fear. On one channel, an alien captain cried as he sent his last message before being overrun. On another, images of humans calmly disabling planetary defense satellites spread like fire. The galaxy, which had once mocked humanity, now watched it in terror. On the Terran flagship, everything remained quiet. Officers spoke in calm voices, every move deliberate. There were no cheers, no wild celebrations, no drunken victory. They hadn't fought for applause. They had fought for the moment when the galaxy would finally stop underestimating them. The commander stood at the front of the bridge, his eyes fixed on the glowing map of alien core worlds. A network of red lights showed the remaining resistance, small, broken, scattered. He spoke softly, but every word cut like steel. Phase 4, he said. Terran ships moved out in organized wings. Destroyers and frigates advanced through the wreckage, targeting escape craft and command vessels. Heavy cruisers shut down comm relays. The Leviathan Dreadnought drifted slowly behind them like a dark mountain, silent but terrifying. Entire alien worlds held their breath, watching its approach. On many of these planets, defenses were already going offline, not because they were destroyed, but because the crews had abandoned their posts. Fear was doing the work faster than the Terran guns. Inside one alien command bunker, generals argued over surrender. One shouted that they could still fight, that they still had planetary cannons. Another slammed his fists against the table, demanding that they run. But their communications were already jammed, their spaceports locked down. They were not facing diplomats. They were facing predators who had studied them for years. And the humans weren't giving them time to breathe. The Council made one last, desperate decision. A broadcast went out across every frequency in the galaxy. It was shaky, full of static, but everyone heard it. The Council chair's voice trembled. Humanity, we are ready to talk. The signal broke off as Terran jammers swept through. The message ended before it could become a plea. Back at the Terran flagship, the commander listened to the intercepted broadcast. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply looked out into the stars, remembering the years humanity spent bowing at that same council table. Every insult, every humiliation, every time their colonies were stripped, their people dismissed, their fleets mocked. This war wasn't about territory anymore. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity would never kneel again. In orbit of the Council capital world, the Terran fleet emerged in full. Thousands of ships formed a perfect wall of black steel and blue fire. Civilians on the surface stared up at the night sky, seeing the Terran fleet as a storm about to break. Council leaders watched in horror as their defense systems failed one by one. The humans didn't fire immediately. They didn't have to. Just being there was enough. A transmission cut through every channel across the galaxy. A human voice, calm, cold, and steady. For decades you told us what we could not do. Tonight you will listen. The entire galaxy went still. From distant colonies to council palaces, every being understood that humanity wasn't just winning. They were rewriting the balance of power. The Leviathan Dreadnought turned its massive cannon toward the capital's defense ring. The glow built slowly, filling the sky with light. On the ground, alien leaders fell silent. Their fleets were gone, their walls broken, their words meaningless. This was not the humanity they had mocked. This was the humanity that had watched, waited, and learned. And now they had come to collect. The commander's final order echoed across every Terran ship. Begin the final advance. Engines roared. Formation shifted. The storm descended toward the Council's heart. No one could stop it. No one even dared to try. The galaxy had always believed humanity would never strike first. But they had. And now, nothing would ever be the same again. The skies above the Council capital burned with a cold blue light. The Terran fleet hung over the planet like a storm that refused to move on, silent but crushing everything beneath its shadow. Alien citizens stared at the night sky with wide, terrified eyes. They had grown up being told humanity was weak. They were taught that Earth was a small, irrelevant world that should be ignored or controlled. But tonight, the truth hung over them like a blade. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not afraid. Humanity was here. Inside the Council fortress, the most powerful alien leaders in the galaxy huddled together, their faces pale, their hands shaking. Every door that once kept others out now felt like a cage, locking them in. Outside, the last defense lines around the capital were collapsing. Alien soldiers were surrendering in waves. They were not beaten by numbers, they were beaten by fear. Every ship destroyed, every system that fell, every silence on the comms was proof that humanity had done what no one believed possible. They had defeated the Council. On the Terran flagship, the commander stood in the center of the bridge, his gaze steady on the glowing image of the planet below. Reports flowed in without pause. Enemy fleets gone, defense networks silent, communications under Terran control. His officers worked with calm precision. Not a single cheer came from the crew. They weren't here to celebrate a battle. They were here to end an era. The Council finally made its last move. A small fleet of diplomatic shuttles rose from the planet, their shields flickering like weak candles against the overwhelming power surrounding them. A transmission opened. A dozen alien voices spoke at once, begging for terms, offering tribute, pleading for peace. For the first time in history, the mighty Council was on its knees. The commander let the voices speak. He didn't interrupt. He didn't respond. When the room fell silent, his voice came through calm, heavy, and unshakable. For years you spoke and humanity listened. Now you will listen. His words didn't carry fire or rage. They carried something far more dangerous, certainty. The Terran fleet parted slowly, allowing the shuttles to pass through. But the Council leaders inside those ships could feel it. The weight of thousands of cannons locked on them, the silent reminder that mercy was a choice humanity didn't have to give. When they reached orbit, their shuttles docked with the Leviathan Dreadnought. Its hangar was vast and dark, built not to impress, but to intimidate. Inside the Leviathan, the Council leaders were led through long, cold corridors. No banners, no symbols, no songs, only silence. When they entered the command hall, the Terran commander stood alone. No guards, no threats. He didn't need any. The power outside spoke for him. The Council members tried to speak again, but their voices shook. They offered riches, systems, and promises. But the commander raised his hand once, and they fell silent. For years, he said slowly, his voice echoing through the metal hall, you took from us. You stripped our colonies. You mocked our strength. You controlled our future. We built in silence while you laughed. And tonight you've learned what silence can become. None of them dared to look him in the eye. One Council member fell to his knees. Another whispered something about surrender. But the commander didn't move closer. He didn't need their apology. He wasn't there to beg for respect. He was there to make sure they would never forget this night. From this moment, he said, your Council no longer rules this galaxy. Humanity does not kneel, not anymore. Outside, the Leviathan's cannons powered down, not because humanity couldn't destroy the capital, but because they didn't need to. Power had already changed hands. The alien fleets were gone, their armies scattered, their leadership broken. Across star systems, alien worlds received the same simple transmission. The Council has fallen. Humanity leads now. The galaxy held its breath as the Terran fleet slowly turned, the stars reflecting off its black hulls. The humans didn't need to occupy every world. They didn't need to shout. Their victory was written in the ashes of fleets and the silence of those who once thought themselves untouchable. The Council chamber on the capital world stood empty for the first time in centuries. The golden walls that once echoed with alien voices now belonged to no one. On the flagship bridge, the commander watched the planet fade into the distance. His officers remained silent, understanding what had just happened. This was not just the end of a war. This was the rewriting of the galaxy's future. Humanity had struck first, crushed the most powerful force in existence, and stood alone at the top. The galaxy would remember this night forever, not just for the battle, but for the moment when every race finally understood. Humanity was no longer a voice at the table. Humanity was the table. The stars themselves had changed, and the Council no longer existed.